I'm going to be talking to Tony Leiserowitz, who's a Yale climate expert, about a documentary entitled Meltdown that he was involved with. It's a story about the melting of the Greenland ice sheets, and it's produced by Mike Tolan, who's an Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker. So welcome to the interview, Anthony.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Now, look, why don't we start with an overview of this story and your role in the filmmaking?
Sure. So this was a really unique opportunity for me. So let me first of all start by saying the film releases today, Friday, February 12th. It's available on streaming services all over the country and even around the world now. So, Amazon, Apple, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a really different kind of a film, actually. I think most of us have, through many years now, have come to build expectations in our head of what a climate change film is. This is not a scientific documentary. It's not an advocacy film. It's not a Hollywood disaster movie. It's not like a long list of here are all the horrors of climate change or here's how the climate system works. It's not really that. It's a very different lens because it's basically an intimate exploration of art and science, beauty and tragedy, the personal and the global, through the story of, first and foremost, of a world-renowned art photographer named Lynn Davis, who was a pioneer in the field of art photography as a woman, and who did really spectacular work, but she found herself 30 years ago being basically drawn to, compelled to, through actually a moment of intense grief that she touches on in the film, to go to Western Greenland, where nobody was going, to take photographs of these gorgeous sculptural forms of icebergs. And she kept going back over and over again, and it became one of the many parts of her career that she became very celebrated for, because they are just gorgeous photos. But in the process, she became an unwitting chronicler of climate change, because over that 30-year period, of course, the world has warmed tremendously. And as we now know, Greenland is just shedding ice at not just record rates, but accelerating rates. So the filmmakers first encountered her work just purely as on an artistic level and said, this is an incredible story. We'd love to take her back on location to talk about this. But she said, there's no way I can do this I'm not a climate expert. I need to bring somebody to engage this conversation. And so they found me. And so the two of us went to Greenland on location. Greenland, of course, is something that I've been learning about, studying about from afar for myself for 30 years, but had never actually been there. And so this was just an incredible opportunity to both experience that place, but also to experience it through her eyes. And likewise, she was able to experience it through my eyes.
Now, you're an expert on communicating science. And I have to tell you, I watched the trailer for this film, and it is stunning. It's beautiful. Does that kind of imagery connect with people on an emotional, visceral kind of level in a way that, discussions with about the science doesn't?
That's such a great question. So the short answer is yes. And I would say I'm making a very broad brush statement now because there are plenty of exceptions, and especially in recent years. But by and large, most climate communication has been driven by the science, of course, because it ultimately was something we only know about because of the work of climate science. But science itself is a language that is predominantly represented in words and numbers and abstract symbols and charts and maps and graphs and all this very abstract kind of stuff to a population, most of the world, that is incredibly local. They don't have all that background information of how the climate system works or what the earth is and how it works and all those details that make those numbers so meaningful for those of us who live in that world, but don't really connect for most people. And so what we wanted to do with this film is to take this phenomenon, which is what people do very readily associate with global warming, is melting ice. Ice sheets breaking off of Antarctica, melting glaciers around the world, retreat of sea ice in the Arctic. You've seen those pictures over and over and over again, but they're always represented in this very, particular emotional frame. These are signs of what's a terrible catastrophe that is erupting and emerging across the world, right? And yet there's rarely a human being in any of those pictures. And most of us, frankly, just aren't that engaged by pictures of melting ice. I mean, when was the last time you spent a half hour watching the ice melt in your glass, right? I mean, it's just not inherently interesting to human beings in that way. Here was a great opportunity to take that fundamental icon and try to actually understand it and appreciate the deeper meaning of these objects, which are both at this exact same time these signs of portending tragedy, but at the same time are these gloriously beautiful sculptural works of the natural world. And so it's really trying to explore that tension.
Now, in watching the trailer, I noticed there was a small village, Greenland village, that was featured. And what role did the Greenlanders play in the storytelling?
Yeah, they were an important part of the story. In fact, you'll see in the film that we interview a number of them and really try to at least bring their voices, bring their local experience into this. And of course, they're right on the front lines. They are watching these changes affect them, and it's affecting them in very real ways. The fish are no longer there in the way that they used to. The ice is no longer safe in the way that it used to. I mean, and these are stories, and frankly, that I've had the great opportunity to work with Inupiaq Eskimo communities above the Arctic Circle. And this is like everywhere across the Arctic, is this basic story. They are watching the changes happen because while the world has warmed already about a degree, it's warmed 2 to 4 times faster in the Arctic region. So in many ways, if we want to understand what our future looks like in terms of the rapidity of change, it's the Arctic where we should be looking, because these people, these places are already experiencing pretty dramatic changes. And so again, that's part of the story.
The final question, Anthony, do you find that when people view this, that they make the connection between what is happening in Greenland and what is happening wherever they might happen to live?
Well, we don't know yet because most people haven't had a chance to see it, but at least the few people that I've shared it with, at least they tell me that they have suddenly understood and engaged this issue on a deeper, not just emotional, I mean, some people have even said on a deeper, almost spiritual level of just kind of coming to grips with, and I don't mean to grandiose here, but the human condition, right? I mean, life is complicated. The world is a beautiful place to be in, even when it's filled with tragedy and devastation and so on. And human beings have always done this in even the best of circumstances and the worst of circumstances, is find the beauty in their circumstances. And I think that's really a very interesting and important thing to recognize about being alive on this planet right now. It's not a simple story of doom and gloom and all things are terrible. And it's not a simple cardboard story of everything's wonderful and great. It's a really complicated mixture of those. And so this is just one story that tries to tease apart some of those connections.
One supplemental question, Anthony. I've argued many times in columns that when we're trying to understand the energy transition, data and so on is not as effective, but narrative and storytelling, that's what people really connect to if you want to get the general public on board. So do you expect that we'll see a lot more of these kinds of documentaries that are storytelling, but then connecting them to the broader climate change narrative? How do we do that?
Yeah, so I would encourage you and your viewers to come check out something we've been doing for about a decade called Yale Climate Connection, climateconnections.org actually. And the point is that it is storytelling. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, for all of our technological advancements, television, social media, all the things we talk about, TikTok is like the preeminent expression of human civilization now. For all of that, we are still the fundamental, most important form of communication we've yet developed is what we were using back in the Stone Age when we were huddled around fires, and that's storytelling. Storytelling was essential to being able to communicate from one person's experience to another person's experience, so you didn't have to go through a bad thing. Like, let me be really simple. Don't eat that berry because, someone else in our tribe ate that berry and they died, right? That is a way to communicate experience without you actually having to experience it yourself. unbelievably powerful tool, and that of course has allowed us to build the civilization we live in today. So yes, storytelling is critical. And with Climate Connections, we're trying to elevate those voices of people from every walk of life who are both experiencing the impacts here and now, but even more importantly, rolling up their sleeves and taking action and demonstrating to all of us, this is what it means to be an active citizen. And here's how you too can make a difference to address this global challenge.
Anthony, thank you very much, and good luck with the documentary.
Thank you very much.